So welcome to Managing and Deploying Drupal. How's the audio in the back? Everybody can hear me okay? Okay, great. This is a beginner session, novice level. I'll show you in just a second some things that should look new to you for you to get value from the session. I'm Chris Johnson. I work for Phase 2. I'm a director of engineering there. That's my email address if you want to send me questions later or even during the session, though I won't be checking email while I'm talking. At DCATL if you want to tweet, but I won't be checking that while I'm talking, but I might look down right after if people want to send questions. And that's pretty much my username anywhere on the internet. So if you find me on GitHub or Bitbucket or any of the 100 other places there are, that's likely me. So is this the right talk for you? Things on this, something here should look new to you for you to get value out of this session. We'll talk about what these things are, why you would want to use them, and how they will make your life better. But if you use all of these on a daily basis or you've used them before, this is really going to be an introduction and an overview, so we're not going to dive super deep. So I remember when I first got out of school and started working, this was how I kept track of what I was doing and when I made changes. I would make archives of directories, or I would copy them and put date stamps, or I would think I was clever and put little names like this is the one I gave to the client last time, and then 2 months later I wouldn't remember what that meant or anything. So if this is your version control system right now, this talk's perfect for you. If when you go to deploy something to a customer site or a client site, it involves you logging into the Drupal admin section and going to views and remembering what you did while you were developing the view to recreate it on production, this is a good talk for you. We're going to help you out and make your life a lot easier. And if your deployment tools look like firing up FileZilla or some other FTP program and trying to see what files you had added or what files you had changed and copying them over, again, we're going to make your life a lot simpler because you should stop the way that you are working. Effectively, sooner or later, you are going to do one of the following things. You're going to break the production site while you're trying to add functionality to it. You're going to miss a setting, and the client's going to be like, why doesn't it work? You're going to actually put something there. The client's going to change their mind and tell you to take it off, and you're not going to remember exactly what version of code that you had before, and you're effectively going to have to redo it to undo it. You're going to update a module, forget that you had adjusted how that module worked to satisfy the client's need, and you're going to lose track of that, and in doing an upgrade, you're going to break the site. Or you're going to have two people working on either two people, or you're going to be working on two different things at one time, and you're not going to be able to keep track of how they interact and be able to deploy just one of those. So let's talk about some standards and goals of what your work life should look like. Number one, you should have at least 2 environments. You should not develop in the production system or in the live system. That's basically just flirting with disaster to not have 2 environments. A lot of people do develop in production because it's kind of a pain to have 2 environments at times, and we're going to talk about how to ease that pain. Another goal is the ability to set an environment to a known state, right? So if a client comes to you and says, I want my website to be back to what my website looked like a week ago, and this is irrespective of Drupal, by the way, you should be able to do that. Similarly, if they say, I want it to look like what it looked like 6 months ago, you should be able to do that. So the ability to set the environments to known states is a goal. The ability to apply upgrades, and this is particular or a lot more applicable to Drupal than just static websites, but the ability to apply module updates without losing modifications that you've put there. And then just the ability to coordinate between multiple developers, multiple branches of feature development, know who did what, that type of thing. So the things we're going to talk about as we go along here are designed to help you achieve these goals and these standards. So step 1, version control. Does anybody not know what version control is? Okay, good. I was like, otherwise I'm going to have to skip slides, and then we're going to go really fast in this presentation. All right. Version control is just software that tracks changes to sets of files. All right, and what that means is, as opposed to, like, let's think about Microsoft Word, right? Word has little track changes functionality. You've probably used it. It shows this person did X, this person did Y. People email it back and forth between each other. If you expand that and talk about the entire set of files and tracking those as one change, that's what version control software does. There's no more .back files. There's no more .dated directories. The software itself is responsible for keeping track of that for you. Another thing that it offers is, because it keeps track of those changes and who made those changes, it facilitates the coordination between developers, because developer A makes change 1, developer B makes change 2. The system itself, when it goes to apply those changes and keep track of them, can say, hey, the change you just made conflicts with the change this other person made. Or if it doesn't conflict, it can just apply both changes and you get sort of a magic third version of the system. So there are a couple of key concepts in version control, and this is irrespective of what software tool you're using to do your version control. These are just sort of the overall concepts there. So number one is the concept of a repository, and this is just the official set of all the changes throughout time, right? This is sort of the one true area and where the version control system is doing its work. Similar to that is a working area. And so the working area is where you are doing your work, and it just represents a particular state of files that the version control system can look at and say, oh, this is different than the last state I had saved. Do you want me to save it, or do you want to get rid of those? Do you want to set it back to the last state that I knew? This is where you're doing your work, is the working area. There's the concept of just capturing the changes, right? So asking the version control software, because it's not automatically doing this, every time you change a character in a file or every time you save a file, right? You do your changes and you say, my changes are to a state that I want to save. Will you please capture them for me? There's the concept of a revision or a version, which is just one of those particular save points. There's the idea of retrieving changes from a repository. So you can say, hey, I know that developer C made some changes to the repository. Can you give those to me so that I can see them? There's the idea of naming the current state, so you don't have to remember, was that Thursday at 2 p.m. when that happened that I want back, or was that Tuesday at 3 p.m.? You can actually give the change a name, right? You can say this was delivery A, this was delivery B, or this was the close of sprint 1, this was the close of sprint 2, this is the close of sprint 3, depending on how you work. And then there's the idea of just setting your working area to a specific state so that then you can start to make changes that can be tracked. So those are the overall concepts. So let's talk about that in the context of Drupal. Right, and just talk about what a workflow with a version control system would look like. So you'll download Drupal, just like you would always download it. You would tell your version control system, hey, I want you to add all of these files and start tracking them. You would tell it to save. You'll add modules, you'll make modifications, you'll set up a theme, you'll do the 1,000 things a client wants you to do before you can launch a site. And then you'll say, okay, I want to add all those changes, save the state, right? And you'll just iterate that way until you get the site to a place where you're happy with it. At that point, you'll likely name the state, right? You'll say this was release 1 or this is release 2. And then you'll put that state into production. And then the client will be so happy, they'll ask you to do a bunch more work, and you'll just go back to step 2, and you'll keep doing that over and over and over again. And that's the, I'm sorry, go to step 4. Which then sends you to step 2. And that's just a basic workflow with version control. We're not talking about multiple developers here. We're just talking about this is kind of how you operate in order to let the version control system do the things you want it to do for you. So that's a lot, right? Git. Everybody heard of Git, at least from the perspective of, I see it mentioned on Drupal.org occasionally. I'm not really sure what it is, but it's at least a word I've seen. Okay, so Git is a particular version control system. A couple of years ago, Drupal switched from Subversion to Git. I've used 5 version control systems over the course of my life at this point. Git is the current one that I use on a daily basis, and it's the one that I would recommend to anyone for 99% of your needs. So there's a couple of things about Git that you'll hear. And number one is that it is a distributed version control system. And that probably means nothing to you, especially if you just found out about version control systems. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history. Systems like Subversion or CVS, which were Subversion was actually the system CVS was the system Git was on, Drupal was on before they switched to Git, work in a particular way, which is there is a server. It is the canonical master copy of the server, and anytime you want to do anything, you interact with the server, right? And that's just referred to as a centralized version control system, because there's one point of authority. Git is a distributed system, which means there is no single point of authority. What you have on your machine when you're working is a full and complete copy of the repository, right? You can unplug your machine from the internet, you can get on a plane, you can do all kinds of things, you can track your changes, and you don't need an internet connection. If you're using Subversion, you've got to be able to connect to the Subversion server. Same thing with CVS or any other sort of centralized system. Now, people generally are going to operate in a manner that is much like that centralized model, even when using Git, because it makes the rules for things very clear, right? And then the rules for things, what I mean is, makes it very clear where the official canonical location of the code is. But you don't have to, and the way you'll actually see me operate when I do some examples here will illustrate a bit of the distributed nature of Git, because I'll show you as I make some clones, which is just copying the repository over. I'll have my copy on my on my machine, and then we'll just make a copy of it, and the copy will treat my copy as the authoritative source, without me needing to push to like GitHub or Bitbucket or just a centralized Git server or that type of thing. And developers can do that, right? So you could have pods of developers that pull from each other that never actually push to the canonical source until they're all ready. And that's one of sort of the mind-bending things about distributed version control systems is you have that capability, right? You can have multiple places that you say, give me some updates to the code from. But these are some of the basic commands that you're going to want to see, and we'll actually walk through an example in just a second. Init is just to initialize an area for the repository to do its tracking for you. Add is when you say, hey, take a look at all these files. They're in a state that I'm ready and happy for them. Add them to your list of what you're going to save. Commit is actually, okay, save those changes. Tag is where you name the set. And then fetch and checkout are some things that you use to pull items and then deploy it. So let's get down to some examples. Okay, so this is our production system. Okay, this is our local system. So just to set the stage for you guys. Let's see what directory I'm in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a website. And it's not going to take long because I already created it, and I'm just going to copy a bunch of files. So you're not going to have to watch me type HTML. So no worries there. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do here, and this is cleanup from when I was prepping, is get rid of this directory. That's where all my website and all my repository was. So I have just destroyed my life because I've just destroyed all my work and all the tracking of it. But it's okay because I have copies. Okay, so I've made an area where I want to work. I'm going to go there and I'm going to ask Git. I'm basically going to say, I want you to treat this as my repository and working area. And so what you'll just see there is you see a .git folder got created. The .git folder is where the repository for Git is. The directory I am is my working area. And it's a little hard to see them because you don't have that remote server that acts as your repository. It's all in one, but that's intentional with Git. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to copy a site over. And so I've just got like an index file and some images, and we'll deploy it in a second, and you'll see how awesome sites were in 1995 when I started working on websites, and what the Drupal Camp Atlanta site might have looked like. So I've just done my work, right? Nothing connected to version control yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Git to track everything that's in this current directory, right? And so if I say git status here, it tells me a couple of things here, which if we have time at the end, we'll talk about branching, but that's a little more of an advanced version control concept. But it says, hey, I now see that you have these 5 new files that you are interested in having me pay attention to. And so I'm just going to commit. We'll just give it a nice message. And that's it. Okay, so Git now has a version, right, of, it's captured this state, right? So when I say this, here's this name state of files. So now I'm going to go and we're going to deploy it to my production system. Well, sorry, I skipped one step. I skipped the naming step. So I just tagged it, and the command I just ran, by the way, was this. And it gives me the opportunity to put a message here. And if you notice on the Git log, there's nothing different here, right? It's still just one set of files. But if I ask it to decorate this, it can tell me that it knows this change by a variety of names, but the tag is the most important one, right? It knows that change is that name. So I can use either one of those interchangeably. So now we'll go over to production, and what I'm going to do here is quickly just set up to pull from my local system, right? So if you were working in a centralized model, this would be a checkout or something you would fetch from GitHub. I'm just basically treating some other area of my file system as that canonical example. So what I've done is, I've set up this directory as is the copy of all the work that's going on in this directory. And we'll look at that in just a second. And then to get it where you guys can actually see it, I got to set it up so it's my document root. That's symlinking and doesn't really have anything to do with any of this. But because of that, now we can take a look at what Drupal Camp Atlanta would look like in 1995, right? Like this is what websites looked like back then for any of you guys who are a little bit newer to this. You know, you would have stolen a starry background GIF from somebody who made it, and some rainbow horizontal rules, and that was your website. So your boss is like, okay, I'm relatively happy with that. Let's go with it. And then 8 years progress, and they're like, you know, it's kind of looking out of date. It's time to update it. So you go and you say, hey, boss, that's fine. You know, I've progressed. I'm a little more expert. So first thing I'm going to do is, so I'm back to my local working area, is I'm going to say, let's just get rid of everything we did before, okay? By the way, too tiny. I'm just kind of realizing that my eyes and my screen's a lot bigger here. You guys want that bigger? Yeah? All right, okay. Better? So here Git says, look, I saw that you've deleted these because these were files that were being tracked. I could save at this point, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to do is do all of my work and ask Git, hey, what do you know about? And it says, well, now here are the things that you've deleted, and here are things that I've never heard about before. So what I'm going to do is I want it to track the things that it's never heard about, and I want it to track the deletions. So I'm going to do, git add. Sorry, wrong flag. So I just told it to add, and it's kind of weird that I added everything, even to track deletions. But that -a flag basically means track additions and deletions. And you can tell from my git status, now there's a bunch of new files, there's some that got deleted, there's some that got modified. Let's save it again. It's 2013. Let's tag it. Oh, you're going to have to watch me type that. Okay, so in my local area, you can see I have two versions. Oops. And, I have different names for them. Let's go back to our production server. As you can see, nothing's changed on production, right? I was just doing my work locally. I'm going to do git fetch. Oops. One second. It should be tracking it. See if it's a permission issue. If not, I'll have to, we'll reclone it and we'll see if the internet works here in just a second. I shouldn't have to because I can pull directly from that repo. That's the whole beauty of version control here, or distributed version control. Oops. We'll just reclone it and I'll show you what it looks like. So now it's updated and here's our nice fancy 2013 version. And if the boss is like, well, we kind of need to go back to 1995, you could just check out the 1995 version, right, and swap back and forth. And it's that simple. All right, any questions on that? Okay. So we shall quickly return to PowerPoint. And we'll do a quick note about what to version. So by default, when you're working in Drupal, you're not going to version things like your files directory. You're just tossing lots of binary assets in there. That's treated as content. That's not things that wind up in your version control system. What you're versioning is your code and your configuration and those types of things. So those are the things that you want to version, not your content. Also, versioning binary assets, Git can do a lot of compression, especially for text files. Once you start versioning binary things, your repository is going to get very large. So if you actually do want to use a version control system to version binaries, it's probably good to come up with a system where the binaries are in one system, in one repository, and your code is in a different one, so you're not having to tote around like 6 gigs worth of images for your client. So on to deploying site updates. So a lot of people work in production for Drupal because Drupal kind of mingles configuration and content, and that's its power and its downfall at times. It's powerful because that lets a lot of sites get built purely through the user interface for the administrator. It's difficult because that means, well, you need the database, right, in order to do some development. You're doing your development, and then it's very difficult to extract what you just changed in the database and put it only that into a site that's been running in production where they may have also been making content changes. It's not like you could go and say, okay, stop working for 2 weeks while I get this sorted out, and once I'm done, we'll put what I copied back up there. So that makes deploying updates difficult, and that also makes those configuration changes such that they can't be versioned, right? Because they're in the database. There's nothing that can track it. So this is where the features module comes into play for Drupal. And really what features does is, for lots and lots of configuration, it'll extract that from the database. It'll make a Drupal module for it out of it for you. Then you can check it into your version control system, and you can push it up to production, and then say features can take that from the code and stick it back in the database. There's a big list of things that it can capture there. It can't capture everything, and we'll talk about what you do when it can't capture things in just a little bit. But there's a lot that it can capture, and generally there's ways to write things to make it available to features, but it does a lot. So let's take a quick look at a features example. And for that, we need to switch over to Drupal. Okay, so we're going to take a look at our source site here. Whoa. All right, we'll make the source site our destination site here. We'll do it backwards. One second, sorry. There we go. So quickly, because the source site was supposed to already have this feature built for you, let's assume that you want to go through and someone wants to make a photo gallery for you. You come in, you create a new content type called photo gallery. We're just going to add a field to it, and then I'll show you the features part, and then we'll switch over. Let's just say you're going to add a simple field called a photo. It's an image field. We'll just save the defaults for all of these, but it can be unlimited. There. So now, theoretically, we have a photo gallery content type that we've developed in production, right? Added some features. You'll go through and do theming and that type of thing. And now you want to take that from development and you want to distribute it. So I'm going to turn on our features module. And we'll take a look at what features lets you do. So what features lets you do is you can come in here to structure, and you can come here to features. And if you have a lot of feature modules, it's got some fancy functionality here. But what it lets you do is this create feature really means I want to create a Drupal module out of some configuration that's in the system. So we'll come in here and we'll say we want to create it. And this shows you kind of all the configuration just in this small system that you can export. Let's say, hey, I want to export that content type, and it'll automatically say, okay, if you want to give that content type to somebody, that content type actually came with a field. It came with a body, it came with the photo, it has some dependencies on the image module and the features module. Had you defined a particular image style for it, it would say you'll need to export this image style, that type of thing. You can come in, you can say, okay, I'm going to name this module my gallery module. I'll give it a version. And then you can download it. And when you download it, what will wind up happening is it's going to give you a tar file that's a module, just like you downloaded one from Drupal.org. Okay? So I've got this saved. So eventually you wind up in your code base. And you'll add your module, just like you were adding a normal Drupal.org module. You'll check it into version control, deploy it up to production. And then in production, what you'll do is, so now pretend that we switched over to our production in this, let me actually delete this content type. So now we have our nice clean production system again. Come into modules. Gallery should be showing up here. 1 second. Gallery. Ah, thank you. Yes. I was like, why? It helps if you put the module in the right place. Thank you very much. So now we have our gallery module as soon as we get down to it. You can enable that, save the configuration. And I believe it's done. So now you'll see that our gallery has shown back up, as well as one that I prepared earlier. If you come into the configuration and you take a look at the image styles, there's actually now a panorama image style that has shown up. And if you take a look at features, it'll actually show you that that module's there. And it'll tell you that it's in the default state. Like the current configuration in the database matches the configuration of that module on the file system.
Mm-hmm. Have they improved features over the last couple of years? I used it several years ago, and frankly, I found it useless because you found yourself, you're always having to type in and define each little field, and everything would cascade, and you wouldn't know what you had and what you needed and what depended on what. Even for a small site, I found it actually confused me even more. I found it completely useless.
Yeah, I mean, features has had a lot of work done to it over the last couple of years. You probably most noticed that in the create feature interface, right? It's a lot easier to tell what the elements are. This used to be like a very, very large page.
Each one of those to see which ones are going to be applicable, and you have to like comb through there and see what you need and see what you don't. You know what I mean?
Well, it does a lot of auto detection, right? So you say article, you click here, it does a lot of this auto detection for you. Oh, well, you still do have to know what components of the site comprise the feature that you want to make. There's.
I remember that being pretty good stuff in the programmer. I found that actually you could forget things, you know what you forgot, you had to comb through there, and maybe I got it, maybe I didn't. So I telling you this 6 fields or those 12 fields, and you really just didn't know. Even for anything more than the most simple feature, you were just don't even bother. Just go ahead and do both things by hand and be done with it. So I actually found it's better just do your development site and just write it down and do it on site.
If you feel like that works better for you,
I was thinking, you could say it improved it, but otherwise, I don't know how people are using it. That's
Yeah.
where other people say the same thing about features.
yeah, I mean, I would not work in Drupal without features, personally.
Maybe they improved it the last 2 or 3 years, but
Yeah.
it's a great idea. It's, you know,
I got a little confused when created a content type
hmm
and went and deleted it after you created the features.
That was just to clean up because I did have 2 sites set up, and one of them got destroyed in the midst of prepping here, so I was going to be swapping between one site and another. So I had to clean up because I was using the same site to reset it to clean. Right, so as she mentioned, like the work that I did where I had to say, create this content type, add this field to it, configure it, all of that type of thing. Without features to put that functionality from my development instance to the production instance, I would have to go through the admin UI again and redo all of those steps and hope that I did not miss one. Whereas with features, I say, these are the things that I want to capture. And then I move the code over, turn the module on, and everything is done for me. Any other questions? All right. So features does have some shortcomings. It can't capture everything. There is still some mingling of configuration and content. And what you'll notice is, even after you put something on a site, after a little while, someone will go and they'll just want like to update a label or a name of something that you would think should count as content, but it's not. It's actually captured in the feature, and that shows up as the feature becomes overridden. And that interface can show you what the differences are. So it's not perfect. That module enabling, right? That remembering to go and enable the module after you've done the deployment is still a manual step. So that's kind of one drawback to your deployments. So there are some shortcomings to it. And then as you mentioned, you do have to know which components comprise the functionality that you want to deploy.
how do you know what it captured? How do you know it didn't capture something?
Oh, it won't show up on the list, right? Like so it does capture views, but I'm going to use a view as an example. If you went and said, oh, well, I defined this very nice view that gave me a slideshow for my photo gallery, and you went to say, I want to add that element to my module, right? And there's nothing there in views for you to add. That would be because, oh, well, it couldn't capture, right? It couldn't capture the...
Don't just like redefine that thing in your view.
Right. Now, it can, like features itself can capture views. That was just, but there might be a module that provides some functionality that features can't capture that functionality to code.
And this is all changed in Drupal 8 too. They kind of
Right.
developed this in Drupal 8 to make this problem go away.
So yes, the configuration system in Drupal 8 is different. That means the things you might use features for in Drupal 8 would be a little different than, you're using it for 2 things in Drupal 7, which is to group together functionality and to capture that configuration and push it through environments. Drupal 8 has a configuration mechanism so that all the configuration should be right. So it should take care of the pushing the configuration through environments part of the problem, and features can come back to bundling it for distribution type of things. And by distribution, I mean, hey, I wrote this cool photo gallery thing, guys. I want to share it with you. Not I want to put it in my client's production system. It's I want to give that to the world.
So we're going to make it much easier.
It should,
Get
yes.
off the cap down.
Yeah. So, sorry?
You're saying that Drupal 8 does a better job of separating the configuration from the constant? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and Drupal 8, the configuration system in Drupal 8 is inherently in the file system. So whereas the configuration, so like the variables table in Drupal 7, right, we call it the variables table because it's the table in the database. In Drupal 8, that data is in the database, but it's also written out to files on the file system. So you can capture them in a version control tool.
Because it's the variables and the features so hard to use. I'm trying to capture all the variables.
So the strong arm module lets you capture the variables with features.
So,
Yep.
will a feature-generated module cooperate with Drush?
Yes.
I can enable Drush to not have to go into the interface.
Yep. So a little bit about overcoming the shortcomings for features. There are update hooks. So an update hook is just a specially crafted function in your modules.install file that these are the things when you go to update.php, right? You'll see like update 7001, update 7002, 7003. Those are just functions that Drupal keeps track of. Have I run this function or not? And you can put like the module enabling that I just showed. You could put that into an update hook, right? You could say module enable gallery. You could push the code base out, run update.php, and it would do that module enabling for you. That is also a place where you can do things that maybe features isn't well suited for, right? You could just script, oh, I want to add this configuration to the database, but it's not capturable by a feature. That's a place where you can use your update hooks. There's also a module called features overrides, which is nice, especially if you are consuming features from someone else, right? Like someone gave you that gallery module, right, which was built with features, and you like a lot of it, except you don't like a particular label, and you want to be able to keep getting updates to that module without losing your label change. You can use features overrides to say, hey, for my site, I want to force the label to this, but everything else can keep getting updated. All right, so let's talk about managing your code base. So a lot of people will just download Drupal, and then they'll download a module, and they'll download a module, and download another one, and they'll apply a patch, and then you can save it and put it to production. And then the status page can help tell you that your module needs an update, right? But what the status page can't tell you is when you go to update that module, you forgot that you had to apply this patch, for example, or that you had made a modification to it. So using a system that Drush provides called Drush Make lets you create a manifest of all the components that your system is built out of. So in this example, what I'm saying is I want to create a code base that is made out of Drupal core version 7.23. I have a couple of patches that needed to be applied there. I want you to grab the date module, and I want you to put it in the contrib subdirectory. So that would go in sites, all modules, contrib, and then date. I want you to use version 2.6 of it. And you can see it's got a lot of flexibility. You're not limited just to a particular module and a particular release version. Here we asked for the entity module, but we're actually using the Git repository for it, and we have a particular revision that we want for that module. We're using the PL upload library, and so it's just going to grab that zip file and unpackage it into sites all libraries for us. And it's a pretty simple tool to run. If our internet connection's working well, I'll give you an example here. So you just run it like this. You use a tool called Drush, which we'll talk about in just a second. But it's Drush Make. You give it your file. Sorry. And then you give it the directory that you want the output in, right? And so what it's going to do is it's going to download Drupal. It got the patches, it applied them, it got the date module, it's cloned the entity module, and it's cloned the PL upload folder. And so now I have an htdocs folder that has Drupal in it. If I come into sites, all modules, you can see I have a contrib directory. that should have the date and the entity module inside of it. Have the libraries directory where I have PL upload and that type of thing. I can check this into my version control system, deploy that out to production, and when it comes time to make modifications, right, time to upgrade a module, what I can do is I can come back to this make file. One more level. I could come and say, oh, it's time for Drupal 7.25 or Drupal 7.26. I could say get rid of everything in my htdocs directory because my version control system, I'm assuming all this is checked into version control, so it's tracking it for you, right? I could rerun the make, get all the new versions, and do a diff to say what's different. You know, is that the things that I expect to be different? If so, great, let me check it in. The other nice thing is this is going to document all your patches for you, right? So it's going to be very obvious that, oh, I applied this patch to date. It's time for me to update it. Did that patch make it into the latest version? Do I need to look for an updated patch? That type of thing. Another nice system is this encourages you to contribute patches, right? Because the patches need to be available at a URL. And what better URL to use than in an issue about that problem, uploading the patch file to Drupal.org. Everybody gets to use it. Everybody's happy. So that's what Drush Make allows you to do. And then I had a couple of screenshots here in case the internet wasn't working. So let's talk about deploy. Yeah.
So you built the entities module using a Git checkout.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were talking about adding the results to a Git repository,
Mm-hmm.
which includes this other Git repository.
Mm-hmm. Like recursion in your brain, you're like, oh, no.
And so you could go down into the entity module and interact with the Git repository, or you can go up to the top and interact with your entire site. And assume you're going to ignore the .git directory in the entity.
Right. So normally when you do that, you'll pass a no working copy. Or, I'm sorry. I believe no working copy is the default. When Drush Make pulls that out, it's going to strip the repo information from entity.
Oh, so it's not a Git repo.
It's not. It's no longer a Git repository. Now, if you use a --working -copy flag, it would still be a Git repository. But the idea is you wouldn't check it in as a Git repository to another Git repository. Git has a concept of what do they call it? Submodules, I think, is what Git calls them. If you're trying to pull together that type of system, but yeah, with Drush Make, generally you wouldn't do that. You would just leave the working copy flag off. Like I use working copy when I'm trying to create a patch for a module, right? I'm like, hey, I need the repo so I can make this patch and submit it. But for actual sort of check it into production, I don't use that. So we're actually running a little short of time here. So let's talk a little bit about moving code. So I showed FileZilla earlier, which a lot of people probably use. It's just SFTP. You have to know what changed, what didn't change. That's just a tough system, right? There's a lot of files in Drupal. It's really easy to miss one, that type of thing. So there's a couple of tools and techniques here. So let's talk about version control. So version control was kind of the system I was showing earlier where basically all your code goes into the version control system and then you check it out and you switch between the tags, right? So that's kind of one deployment system. And my example of using fetch botched up, but normally that works. So rsync is another way that you can use it. Now rsync is effectively what it does is you say make everything over here match what I like. Everything on production should match what I have on my local system, right? And you give it some directories. So I'm going to show you a command here for rsync. Oops, get caps lock off. Okay, So this is kind of a default command. So what I'm telling rsync to do is 1, be verbose, 2, use compression during your transfers, and then 3, this A flag is really the flag that says make these two things mirror each other. Now the A flag is only additive. This is just saying the mechanism by which you want to use. So I want to use SSH during my communication. This delete flag is the piece that says, and if there is a file in production that I don't have on my local system, get rid of it, right? So that's all well and good, except we just talked about not checking in the files directory to your version control system, right? So if you're going to use rsync, you need to be careful about exactly how you construct that command. And you're probably going to want to use this exclude to say, hey, don't pay attention to anything that's in either the files directory on my system or the files directory on the remote system, right? I want you to ignore those. But outside of those, synchronize these two things and make them match. So that's another system of transport there. There's the archive transfer unarchive pattern, which is you zip everything up, you go and you put it on the production server, then you unzip it, and then maybe you rename some directories to put that into production. Capistrano is actually a tool that uses Ruby that helps you automate that. So that's pretty much everything. I was hoping to have enough time to do a top to bottom example for you, but we really don't. But conceptually, create a repo, use a make file, use Drush to build that code base for you, commit the changes, and then deploy the system. And that's a much better workflow for you, and it's much more manageable. I'm free for questions. If anyone has questions, I know we're getting a little short of time. People probably want to get to their next session, but I'm available if anybody has any.
Anything more you can say about Capistrano to those of us before we finish?
So number one, you're not going to use Capistrano by default. There is a project that you can look at called Cap Drupal. You probably want to look at that. There's it builds on the thing called a Railsless deploy. So by default, Capistrano really is built for the Rails world, Ruby and Rails. But you can put a couple of plugins into it that effectively say, stop doing all that crap you do by default for Rails, and then you can start writing the commands that you want to do for Drupal. And then conceptually, if you're using Drush Make, maybe you don't ever check in anything but your make file and your custom code, and you want your deployment system to actually do the build for you. So that can get kind of advanced there. But I would say take a look at the Cap Drupal project and see how it looks for you if you're interested in Capistrano. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.